In the heart of Virginia, a stretch of road known for its beauty, history, and serenity has become the backdrop for one of the most haunting, unsolved mysteries in the United States. The Colonial Parkway, a scenic highway that winds through the picturesque landscapes of Yorktown, Williamsburg, and Cape Henry, has been the site of a series of brutal and unsettling murders, now known as the Colonial Parkway Murders. The murders began in 1986, but to this day they remain shrouded in mystery, leaving a chilling legacy of fear and unanswered questions. The first victims, Kathleen Thomas and Rebecca Dowski. It all started on the night of September 19, 1986. Kathleen Thomas, a 27-year-old graduate student from the College of William Mary, and her best friend, 21-year-old Rebecca Dowski, a fellow student, decided to take a weekend trip. They drove to the Colonial Parkway, planning to enjoy the night and the peaceful surroundings. The two women were close friends, and their trip was meant to be a relaxing escape. But as they enjoyed their evening, something went terribly wrong. The next morning, their car was found along the parkway, abandoned and locked, with no signs of a struggle. A few hours later, their bodies were discovered in a wooded area not far from the parkway. Both women had been strangled, and there was no sign of sexual assault or robbery. The scene was chillingly clean, offering no clues as to the identity of the killer. At first, authorities had no idea who would have targeted these two young women. Was it a random act of violence, or was there something more sinister at play? The second victims, Anna Cogswell and Gary D. As investigators scrambled for answers, the worst was yet to come. In 1987, just a year after the brutal killings of Kathleen and Rebecca, another couple was targeted. On the evening of April 9, 1987, Anna Marie Cogswell, 26, and her boyfriend, Gary Michael D., 29, went on a weekend trip to the Colonial Parkway. Just like Kathleen and Rebecca, they had no idea that they were about to become the next victims of a killer who seemed to be stalking this beautiful but deadly stretch of road. Their bodies were found a few days later, also strangled and similarly positioned, almost as if the killer was taunting investigators. The police were left stunned by the similarities between the two cases. Once again, there were no witnesses, no clear motives, and no leads. As time went on, the possibility of a serial killer seemed increasingly likely. The investigation. Dead ends and frustration. The police were baffled. The killings were eerily similar, yet there seemed to be no pattern, no common connection between the victims. Was it a serial killer who was targeting couples? Or was the killer stalking the parkway for some other unknown reason? As the investigation deepened, law enforcement scoured the parkway, looking for any potential clues, but nothing emerged. There was no physical evidence to suggest who the killer might be, and no one in the small, tight-knit community seemed to know anything about the murders. The case grew cold, and soon, the media began to speculate on the killer's identity. Rumors swirled, and theories abounded. Some believed the murders were the work of a local who knew the parkway well. Others speculated that the killer may have been a hitchhiker or someone passing through the area. But despite the public's growing fear and frustration, no solid leads came to light. The third victims. Yet another tragic pair. Then, in 1989, tragedy struck again. A couple was found murdered along the parkway. This time, the victims were young lovers whose lives were tragically cut short by the same cold, calculating killer. The scene was eerily familiar. Yet again, there were no answers, no suspects, and no further clues. With each new murder, the terror grew. The killer seemed to be taunting the investigators, evading capture and slipping away without leaving a trace. The police were under increasing pressure to solve the case, but they were running out of time, and the community was living in fear of a killer who could strike at any moment. Theories: a serial killer or a local criminal? Over the years, numerous theories have emerged about the identity of the Colonial Parkway killer. Some believe it was the work of a serial killer who traveled from town to town, picking off victims in a calculated manner. Others think it was someone with local knowledge, someone familiar with the parkway, and with access to remote, isolated areas where the victims could be easily disposed of. One of the most chilling theories is that the killer was an officer or someone involved with law enforcement, as some of the murders seem to have been carried out with a certain level of expertise. Others believe that the killings were the result of a personal vendetta or a twisted form of revenge. But despite all the theories, the truth remains elusive. The search for answers. The case remains unsolved. In the years since the murders, the Colonial Parkway case has grown cold. There have been no major breakthroughs, no new leads, and no new evidence to suggest who the killer might be. The families of the victims have never received justice, and the communities along the parkway continue to live in fear, wondering if the killer will strike again. Some believe the case may never be solved, while others hold out hope that one day, the killer will be caught and the families will finally get the closure they deserve. Conclusion: the legacy of the Colonial Parkway murders. Today, the Colonial Parkway remains a peaceful and beautiful highway, but for those who lived through the terror of the 1980s, it will always be remembered as the place where one of America's most haunting mysteries unfolded. The Colonial Parkway murders are a chilling reminder of how little we sometimes know about the people who walk among us. The killer, whoever they are, remains free, and the families of the victims continue to mourn the loss of their loved ones with no answers and no justice.